Hello, my name is Renee L. Rose. I'm the founder of Explore Art Talk. With Explore Art, our featured guests, we have meaningful conversations celebrating artistic and cultural diversity that makes our world extraordinary. So sit back, relax, and check out our content. Thank you for joining us today. Why don't you start off telling me? I'm curious to know how long you've been an artist. Were you an artist as a child? How did you get into art?
I think like most artists that I know, I started very young as a child. Um, I just was naturally drawn to it. When I was about probably 6 or 7, my mother hired an art teacher to come, and she, worked with children. And it was really interesting because, when you're a kid, you paint like a strip of blue for the sky above everything and the house and the little stick people. And so one of the first things that she had me do was paint a skeleton of a horse so you could see what was going on the inside of the horse. And so as a child, I put the head, and all their ribs. And she was just like, no, look, there's this many ribs. And so that was my first lesson in really looking instead of doing what's in your head. And I find that that's actually been a lifelong challenge. Like if you're doing life drawing or something, you think you have it, you step away. It's like, wow, that's really wrong because it's very hard, I guess, for your eye and your brain to work in tandem. So that's like always been a big challenge. And so I think that that was a valuable first lesson in that kind of thinking.
That's very unique that she actually got you a special teacher. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it was because I didn't want to go to day camp. So she's like, you
Oh,
do this then.
that's better than day camp.
Yeah, exactly.
So, how long did you do that? And did you do it in high school?
Actually, my high school didn't have art classes, but I did go to after school classes at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And
Whoa.
so that was an interesting, period. And a lot of people from other schools would get credit for that. I didn't get credit for it because my school just didn't work that way. But it was a really neat experience.
And so after you graduated and you went to college at Pratt Institute?
Yeah, yeah. I went to school originally in Boston. There was a very small school called the Vesper George School of Art, and it was more like a trade school, but it was for like illustration or graphics. So I was leaning. They didn't really separate them. You learned everything, but I was gradually, drawn to illustration. And after that, then I went to Pratt in Brooklyn.
Did you, when you went to Pratt, did you get your master's or it was your under?
No bachelor's because the first school was really just a trade school, so they gave you some credit but not a lot. So it was the bachelor's. I think master's degree programs for anybody who has the opportunity would be really fantastic, but I didn't do that.
Yeah. So when you started drawing um, in college, did you work with very different mediums besides pastels?
Yeah, I didn't start pastel actually until probably about 15 years ago. So I did a lot of pen and ink work, some acrylic, watercolor.
Ooh. So how did you transition into pastels?
Well, I had worked in pen and ink for a long time, and um, through through lifetime, I worked a number of jobs, so I wasn't doing art full time, but I was working in pen and ink. And it got to the point where I didn't like it. It wasn't cooperating. It was just, I don't know, it just was something changed. And I had gone to an art fair actually, and I saw this pastel painting, and I'm like, I want to do that. So at the time, this is typically how I kind of operate. At the time, I was super busy with work, but I bought the pastels. So if I'm interested in something, I always am like way prepared ahead of time. I mean, it could be a year or two before I get to something, but I like research everything and have everything ready. So when I'm ready, I can begin.
Oh, have you ever done oils?
I've done oils a little bit. I didn't do them in school. I have done some. I enjoy them. I have an aversion to the mess. Like it's just like
I went plein airing with a friend of mine, and she's got the backpack, she's got the setup, she's like whipping everything together, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. So it was a nice experience, but it's just like I don't know what it is. It's like a brain thing. I've taken some alla prima classes, and I really enjoyed those, and so I've done some of that. Um, Not a lot. I explore it from time to time, but I have to like get prepared for that.
And you also did watercolors, you say.
Mhm. I
So,
love watercolors. You know, the thing is, I think you have to rein it in because you can kind of get distracted from your focus. And I think it's nice to have a broad base and be able to do a lot of things. But for instance, 2 years ago, I'm going to do watercolor this summer, and my schedule is fairly open, but I just was so committed to everything else that I was doing. So even though you may have free time, it's still a matter of management and also being able to have your life. So it's something I'd still really like to get back to. I think for plein air work, I would love to do watercolor. That's so simple. You have your paper, you have your paint, you have water and a brush. That's it. You know, that's all you have to worry about.
yeah.
And I think that some of the watercolorists, I mean, I look at a ton of watercolors, and there's so many ways to approach that. Some people do something extremely realistic and tight. I gravitate toward like super loose work. Um, some of the Wyeth's work is just like, you know, it just is so vibrant and has so much movement in it and so simple, but it's really difficult to get to that simplicity.
Yes. So you settled with pastels. So how did you choose your subjects? Was it was something you were interested in, or is it something that you explored, or how did that happen?
Well, excuse me. The interesting thing is how everything evolves. Um, at the time that I started, I worked as a dog walker, and I had dogs myself. And so I thought, well, I have plenty of resources here. So I started out doing dogs. Then it became I was doing more cats than I was dogs. Then I
Mm,
got interested in doing other things like farm animals, big into like pigs and sheep and stuff like that.
yeah, I
And
saw
there was
about.
a big there was a big long period of that.
Oh,
And then it you know kind of evolved into other things that you know, not necessarily that I was interested in, but drawn to like nature, like certain kinds of landscapes, not necessarily seascapes, but coastal work along the coast. I spent a lot of time there during the summer. And some things just really kind of, I don't know, it's the beach. What can I say? Um, but I think that sometimes too, certain motifs appear in your work without you even realizing it. So it's not like I want to do this because, but I do it. And that's like, that's why I did it almost after the fact. Like I have to kind of look back. So if I look back over a period of time of work, it's almost like a diary. You can see the change and the progression. And in many of my land and seascapes, there are these paths that don't have an end or they go around, you know, around a bend. And I think that that's, to me, it's about kind of mystery and discovery and what lies ahead. And so I'm always intrigued by that. That's always what I'm drawn to if I'm at the woods or if I'm at the beach and there's a path. And I didn't even know this, didn't notice it. And a friend of mine, like, you always have that path going nowhere. And I didn't see it, I didn't intend it, but that's what happens. So I think a lot of things like that kind of go into the making of a painting. And then very rarely do I out to say, I'm going to do a series, but I'm drawn to something. I said, let me explore that. And then I'll go, you know, a little further.
so
I
with
did,
the
I'm sorry.
so with the farm animals, did you go visit a farm? Did you grow up on a farm?
No, I mean, I got, you know, either people would send me photos of their animals, or if there was like, you know, we have some very small farms around here. They're not, you know, they're kind of like commercial farms that happen to have some farm animals there. So I would go take pictures of them. I think at the time, part of it may have been driven by the fact that I was really into, you know, animal rescue. So there's donkey rescue, there's pig rescue, there's every kind of rescue in the world, llama rescue, you know, so it was kind of like that kind of thing that drew me to them. And I think that many people are drawn to animals because they love them. And my own particular take on that is like it's always so interesting to me. Like you don't really know what's going on in their heads, how they're seeing you. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, you can tell a dog is happy if its dog, its tail is wagging, but they're such individual creatures that, they're just like people.
Yeah, they are. They have little personalities.
So it's just trying to capture what that mood was that day or their personality, you know.
Yeah, they seem like that when I looked at the farm animals. There seemed to be some passion in there, like a soul was in there. You're not just painting some animals,
Right, right.
capturing their essence of that particular animal. That's why I was asking how you got into that.
Yeah, yeah. So um they just call.
So you went from doing the farm animals. What did you get into after that?
I think I did some landscapes. I did quite a few marshes, and I really am drawn to marshes. I'd love to be on one, like in a little rowboat or something. They seem to have all these little water pathways. I've never seen anybody in them. I've never been anywhere where there's access to be on one. I don't even know if you're allowed to be on them, but they always seem mysterious to me. And it's
New
like
Orleans, in New Orleans, in the bayou, there are marshes and stuff that you can, because people go out crawfishing and stuff. They have boats. You can go out in them. I'm not going to go out there, but you can.
right, right. But it's kind of like, what's under the surface because marshes are some of the richest ecosystems. There's all this stuff going on, but you don't see that. You just see the calm above the water. And so it's kind of that mystery of the marsh where nobody goes. It's almost like a no man's land. You see a lot of birds, but you don't really see much else.
Yes, yes. And then what are you doing now? What type of paintings are you doing now?
Well, I don't know. I'm doing a whole bunch of different things. I'm doing things that I had never done before. I've done some uh, buildings and architecture. Um, I
Wow,
like I like history and historical buildings.
that's
Um,
different.
it's very different, but it's still kind of the same thing. I want to capture a portrait of a building, so it's not like here's a house, here's a whatever it is. So I had gone to Boston a few years ago, and so I grew up in Boston. So taking a walk over Beacon Hill, taking a lot of shots of those, brick sidewalks and brick buildings and things like that. And also Maine, Portland has a ton of, historical stuff. And
Yeah,
even in Morristown, New Jersey, I've done some of the more historical buildings. And so it's quite different. They're not very tight. They're not like an architectural rendering by any means, but I've kind of gotten more into that. And this year, for the first time, I tackled statues. And I'm not sure. I think what it is was I had visited the Biltmore Estate a few years ago, took all the pictures and stuff. And on the south, I think they call it the South Plaza or something like that, is this huge expanse. If you were entertaining there, you could have 700 people eating there. But it's just this big, huge expanse. And then you see the mountains in the distance. And then at the four corners, there are these four classical paintings, I mean, statues, and they almost seem dwarfed by the space. They're not tall, it's like this huge expanse. So there's little, they seem very isolated to me. So it was kind of like, is it solitude or is it isolation? They kind of felt lonely in that big space. So it was just trying to capture them and the big sky, this little thing that was, classically beautiful.
yes.
Um, and then this summer, which I called Vampire Summer because the heat here in New Jersey was out of control. I think I stayed in for almost 2 months. I mean, the heat index was like 112 and there was bad air quality. People are going jogging, and I'm like, no, no, I'm staying
I
inside.
didn't know it was that hot in Jersey this year.
Oh yeah, it was horrible. It began in June, and then I was like, well, I hope this isn't a sign of things to come. And then it went on for like 2 months. Like we didn't get
That's abnormal, isn't it?
super abnormal.
Jersey, yeah, wow.
So I was inspired by my fountain because I have a little fountain, and I didn't turn it on because nobody was out there because it was so hot and the water kind of got like murky, and so it's kind of like the lonely fountain. So I painted a picture of that. So I don't know how many other statues I'll do that. It kind of has to be something about the environment or what's going on to strike me, with that. Um, and the other new thing that I've been doing this year is incorporating more people into my paintings, not as portraits, but as, I guess, elements. And I think in many of them, there is a sense of either isolation or solitude. Even if there's a group of people, there's something about it that's not, I don't want to say it's lonely, but it's not convivial. And so it's just, kind of looking for, I guess, peace in a way. And a lot of stuff I think is moving more into imaginative pieces. And I don't know what that is. So I just have to keep going and going and going until I hit it. So it's just kind of like an ongoing.
When you say adjective, do you mean more contemporary, less solid?
What I mean is putting together, there's still realistic, it's still realism, it's still traditional, but just maybe placing elements that wouldn't normally be in a certain place, or
together.
Or yeah, or like more fantastical.
Wow.
I experimented with, I wanted to do a night scene. So it was all out of my head. So it's a girl reading and a cat, but it's the twilight. So everything is dim and you can just see like a little light on the horizon and some shooting stars and the woods are all black. And I'm like, how do I even do that? How do I do that? How do I make this person who the reference I'm using is in, daylight, studio light. And now I have to change all of that and do the lighting and, so that was fun. It was difficult. I'm not sure. You never know what's going to happen when it's an experiment. So I think it came out pretty well, considering all things considered. So, kind of things more like that. I don't know. I mean, that's one example, but.
It seems like you, throughout your career, don't mind exploring and trying new things. So you know how some artists paint landscapes and they paint them for the rest of their lives? You seem to evolve, and I love the transition from one subject in one area to another and just exploring the essence of it, of that particular subject. And then going on to it may be a different subject, but you're still exploring, like even the buildings. It seems like you were exploring the essence of the buildings. And you go from, I like that. Did you think about doing that, or you automatically just allow yourself to do that?
Sometimes it just kind of comes and I say, wow, that would be, kind of cool. I've never done that before. I like to give myself challenges because I see things often. I'm like, oh, I wish I could do that. I'm like, you know what? I have to try. And so I have to, and what's the worst that's going to happen? It doesn't work. Some of them work out really well. Some of them are in the drawer and will remain there until I can pull them out and address them again. I don't like to throw anything away, but there's a chance it might be thrown away. But um, a lot of times it just takes thinking because you can't just, and also a lot of trial and error because, you can't be perfect every time. I think what happens also is that if I'm doing something for a very long time, it's not like I'm never going to do it again, but I need a break from it. So I need some variety. And so then I get pulled into all sorts of different directions, and I find that exciting.
Do you ever go back and redo some subjects? Like, would you go back and do dogs again?
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think of, I actually did a couple of dogs last summer. Um, little one, they were actually little portraits, and those were nice and fun to do. If I see an animal, I'm really looking to do more sheep. Um, Sheep are very difficult because
Hmm.
their faces are weird, like their skulls, they're not as defined. But I actually took a course and it was for oil painters, but it was basically painting sheep. So there's all sheep anatomy. So I learned the sheep and I don't learn it, but I have access to it. So it makes it a lot easier to render something when you know what's going on inside. So
Oh,
like, what's underneath. So a couple of years ago, I mean, I've been painting for years. I'm like, I really don't draw that well. I should be able to draw better. And so I took an anatomy course through the Art Students League. And so, you go through, it's very interesting to see. Then you understand like how the arm works. Like I didn't realize you don't twist your wrist, it twists here. Like there's nothing here to twist. So it's one bone going over the other.
Oh,
So little things like that can help you understand what's going on. Like, feet and hands are so difficult. It's like put some big grass so you don't have to have the feet. But, once learn what's underneath them, it's easier to do.
yeah.
So I think that helped me tremendously in rendering people. And it also lent to my desire to explore that more.
Hmm. Hmm. So have you ever taught classes or anything like that?
I have. I taught for a short while classes at a senior living facility,
Oh, that
um,
was
which was it was very interesting. I volunteered through a local arts organization, and I said, "Is there anything I need to know?" Because some of the people had Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. Some of the people, it ran the gamut. No, you don't need to know anything. And so I was teaching a class where very, very very basic, but how to use a simple grid so you could, do the shapes and get everything, into place. And so they all did the grid. And then a couple of weeks later, I don't know what the assignment was, and there was a couple, a husband and a wife, and the husband had, I don't know what his condition was, but he didn't speak. And so, but I looked at what he was doing and the way that his brain was working, he wasn't exactly doing the grid, but he was doing it in his own way. And that to me was like really fascinating. I'm like, wow, like you don't even know how that happened, but he got something in his brain and he could stick with however he translated that. So that was really a fascinating thing.
yes.
And I've also been teaching a class probably for about 4 years now, started in COVID, and it's through Zoom. A friend of mine asked me to do a class. She's like, I want to paint like you. Will you do a class? And I said, okay. So I've got 3 people that are interested. I'm like, okay. And she said, you'll have it on Zoom. I'm like, okay. And she said, well, you have this Facebook group. And I'm like, okay, I guess you like arrange the whole thing for me. So we set it up and started out, and it's every single week except if there's a holiday or somebody goes on vacation. So every Tuesday night we meet for 2 hours. And
Wow.
my whole I guess premise of the class is you can do it. I can show you a lot of ways not to shortcut. They're actually kind of like training those like the grid or other methods that you can use to things that I didn't know that I didn't learn. And so this will help you. Um, Everybody had some degree of artistic experience. But I said, I will meet you no matter where you are. We used to do all the same assignment, and so we worked together. But now it's pretty much, I want them to explore what they want to do and how they want to do it. So it's kind of like still, I'm coming to you. We might be doing something like, how to paint black because black is a fantastic color to paint because there's so many colors in it. There's always a sheen, there's turquoise or red or pink, how to get that dimension instead of something flat. But I challenged them very early on. I think it probably was the second or third class we had to copy the hand of God or the hand of David, whatever that Michelangelo thing is.
Yeah.
I made
Oh,
them. I made them paint fire. I made them paint waves. Nothing, just waves, like just using 3 colors. And I think the best assignment by far was one that made them very, very angry. I made them use pastel and use the Zorn palette, which is black, ochre, red, and white, and all combinations of those, because you can layer pastel. Nobody in their right mind would use Zorn doing pastel. I mean, it's more for oil painting, but I made them do it. They were angry. They were angry.
I've never used pastels. I'm an oil painter. I love oils. I can't even, I'm fascinated with them, but I've never tried pastels, but I love the way they look. I think that's
Yeah.
fascinating what you guys do with pastels.
Well, it's all the same thing. It's like an oil paint, but it's just dry.
Yeah,
So
but I
it's
guess
like,
the thing is, okay, like you said, it's just dry. With oil, you can correct yourself. With pastels, I'm afraid because it seems more permanent. You're like, you got to know what you're doing.
Well,
I guess.
it's very forgiving
Okay.
because you use like a sanded surface, so there's something for it to cling to. But if you make a mistake, if you have painted like, certain colors, they're light enough, you can paint right over it, or you just take a paintbrush and you just brush and that dust will fall off and you can repaint it.
Oh,
So it's very forgiving, and it's
okay.
it's different than oil painting because you're mixing on your palette or sometimes on your canvas.
Yeah.
But with pastel, like if there's hard pastel and soft pastel. I like the hard pastel because you can draw with it, you can scumble with it, like just bring it down on its side to make a light layer, or you can crosshatch, but you can crosshatch color over color. So if you don't have the right green, you could do green, yellow, red,
Oh,
aqua, and then that's what creates the deep depth.
yeah. Okay. I didn't know if you. Oh, wow. I had to try
So
it one day. Wow.
it's very fun. It's very messy, I'll warn you that. So, I have always had something on the floor. Um, I used to actually have rugs in my studio. I must have been very neat because I didn't have a problem. Then suddenly there was a mess everywhere. I'm like, rugs, no, got to get out of here because of all the dust. So then I got the little plastic mat that I put under
Right,
so that I
right, right.
can just like spray it off or sweep it up or something like that. I know a lot of people who want to work in pastel. They won't do it in their house because it's just so messy. They don't want to have to clean it up. I have a studio, so I can make it as messy as I want.
Outside your house?
No, in my house,
Oh, that's
so,
cool.
so I can shut the door on the mess.
Yes, yes, yes. Um, this is interesting. You're a very interesting person. I love that you did so many different subjects, but the thing I always found was common. It was like you seem to be catching the essence of whatever you were drawing. Does that make sense to you?
It's my hope. Yeah.
Yeah, that's, it's not just like you said, if you draw a building, it seems to be the essence of those particular buildings, capturing the tone or the mood of it. That's the way I can explain it. And I love that because no matter what painting I'm looking of yours, that's what I see.
Oh,
That's
cool.
the impression I get. And I love it, for being real, to me, the animals are realistic to me. They're really beautiful, but that's the thing that you capture. Maybe a seascape, a marsh, it's all that same tone.
Mm,
I haven't seen the fantasy mystical. I'll have to take a look at those. I haven't seen those.
okay.
Yeah, to see how that looks and if it's the same kind of tone, but I bet you it is. You're really good at this.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you are open to exploring and developing yourself. You're not stuck. You're just moving and very fluid of how you do with your career. That's interesting. That says a lot about you because some artists, I don't think they do that. They kind of, not that they're stuck, but they're not as readily open to exploring different types of things. They stay in a zone.
Mhm.
You're just like really open and exploratory. That's amazing. Well, I really appreciate you letting me interview you.
I thank you for giving me the opportunity.